aware that the title of this presentation is ridiculous. And I got some explaining to do. My name is Anadelia Sauceda. My pronouns are she or they. And I am a tender-hearted, squishy baby. And I hope to kind of, first of all, what that means is I probably will get tearful at some point in this presentation. The title of this presentation, I also blame or give credit to Dr. Burdine, because in my brain paralysis and trying to create something for this conference, I was stuck. And I said, help, help, help. And Dr. Burdine kindly held my hand and said, well, what are you working on right now? What do you wish you could tell the people? What are you working on with your patients and for yourself? And she said, I'll be right back. I'm going to rest on that. And when she came back, this is what I had written down. I didn't know what it means. I still don't know what it means. But this is what came out. And so we're going to kind of navigate that together. And I'm going to share a bit of a story along the way. I will say that these words mean something to me and may not mean everything to everyone else. But being in this space today, and yesterday as well, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I'm feeling it again right now. Yesterday's presentations were so inspiring, and seeing everyone's like, man, y'all so smart, and using a lot of academic and scholarly language. And admittedly, I've been away from this space for a while. I don't even use the word psychologist as part of my top 10 identities to describe myself anymore. I'm using words like tender-hearted, squishy baby, you know. And I'm aware that my presentation looks a little different than maybe what y'all have seen. And I'm trying to just sit deep that this is the best representation of me and my work. I will say that I'm informed by my experiences, by my identities, and by the collective wisdom of people I have read and listened to and whose art I've consumed, and my peers, my friends, my family. I will say that I'm a mental health advocate, a healer, an artist, a queer person, and a proud daughter of a Mexican immigrant mother and a Rio Grande Valley father. They taught me that accents are beautiful, that humor is a life vest, and that hard work looks like calloused hands and a strong heart. I am currently healing through the rituals of fire-keeping, dance, play, art, community building, and storytelling. And these are just a few folks that I am pulling from in regards to their words, their strengths, and their stories, as well as the many folks that I can't even name, my patients, my students, trainees, authors, artists, musicians, freethinkers, organizers, activists, elders, ancestors. And there's no citation for this. So we're going to try to define tender-hearted, squishy baby. We're going to identify ways to challenge our perspective on traditional clinical practice and ways to integrate wisdom gained from our communities and our creativity and our collective healing. And we're going to identify ways to incorporate the principles of community, creativity, and connection, collective healing into clinical or personal practice. I don't actually see a ton of separation from how I am in the room to how I am outside. Like Dr. Bird, I mentioned yesterday, kind of what you bring in, that energy is showing up with every person we engage with. I'm going to be doing this through a lot of like reflections and affirmations and some stories. Again, this is more of how I do it. I think what I've learned is that, you know, pretty much Dr. Burdine's presentation was a prereq for this presentation. And every presentation I saw, I was like, yeah, there it is. That's all that stuff being mentioned. That's tender, that's tender, that's tender. Because I get a lot of questions from trainees of like, then how do you do that? I love that concept, but what does that look like in the room? And I am a practitioner. This is like 30-something hours a week with patients, one-on-one, face-to-face, over 15 years. I guess this is how I do it. I still don't know, but I will say, I have a patient right now, and maybe early 20s, in a very rigorous medical school. She has ADHD, and she came to therapy because she failed a very important exam, and her goal is to not fail anymore. Little does she know, that's not the actual goal. At one point in one session, she shares her inner dialogue. Now, mind you, this person spends every waking hour studying. She has no friends, and she is having no fun. And at some point, she says, well, if I don't do it this way, then I am lazy, and I am stupid, and I'll fail. I am worthless. Like, she has all this like really nasty thoughts. And of course, we do the thing, right? Let's challenge that. What if you were like kinder, more compassionate, right? She scoffed at me. She scoffed. I haven't even given her scripts yet to potentially change the thought. She's like, oh, what am I going to do? And she goes into this like mocking voice of like, oh, what I'm supposed to say, good job. Oh, you did so good. Like a baby. That's for babies. And as a baby, I was offended. So I know what it's not. As I'm trying to define this concept, I know what it's not. Because this person, this young person, has been sold that success, to be a medical professional in the healing profession, means I have to be isolated, disconnected from my play and creativity, and to be mean to myself. I feel like I was trying to sell her a concept, a product. I was like, I'm gonna have to sell you on like these things now. I spent like half an hour on this design, so I'm just gonna let y'all look at it. Thank you. Plus, I love alliteration. So I had to break down some of these concepts, and this is what I came up with. Creativity, community, and collective healing. That's what I'm gonna try to sell y'all on how to get the pathway to squishy. Again, we're gonna try to define. This is clearly not an academic or clinical term. This is my term. In fact, it's a bit of an inside joke that I developed during Pride Month. What I do outside of my clinical practice is I actually serve on a board for LGBT organizations, and we do Pride events and community healing work. We create spaces of joy and expression. And during this last year's Pride, one of my creations came to life, and I was deeply moved to tears all month long. And I just embraced it and said, I'm just a tender, squishy baby, y'all. Leave me alone. So maybe you'll have your own. This is what I use to describe the indescribable, a moment, a feeling, the times when things click, times when emotions are fully felt and embraced, even the hard ones, the holding the this, the that, the both, and the and. When you're connected to the deepest part of you or something beyond you, is it hope, love, connection, spirituality, magic, moment of authenticity, vulnerability, acceptance, change? I don't know. But in my deepest grief and in my deepest joy, I am tender and I am squishy. And this is the story of how I got there and how I cultivate the practice of being a THSB. I wasn't always a squishy baby. I wanted to be so tough. I wanted to be seen as tough. But this baby, look how cute I am, y'all. But this baby had big gay feelings, big gay closeted feelings. And I'm pretty sure I did this slide during like National Coming Out Week, because the most tender, loving, creative, vulnerable, and exciting parts of me had remained hidden in that closet. And it's also not lost on me, gender, that I have like the archetypes of masculinity represented in my toughness, a soldier, a footballer, a cowboy. I would still wear all of these outfits, by the way. I had done some writing actually during coming out. I did a performance for National Coming Out Day. And I made peace with this kiddo. I believe they were quite clever in all the ways that they stayed safe, even if it meant being in that really dark closet. So I honor the strategies that kept me safe. And I would encourage you to do the same. And in some reflection, I would encourage you to think about what were the strategies that you did to keep yourself safe. Even if they don't serve you anymore, can you honor them? Can you name them? Can you create new versions of that? And I was always the kid who asked the questions. I wanted to understand the way things were. Now, that could have been safety seeking. Queer kids needed to stay safe. I need to know who's safe. Also, a neurospicy. Noting patterns is very important to me. I was known for my school bus rants about capitalism. There was a whole thing about the Doomberry purses that were really popular at the time. I didn't understand it. I had a whole thing. People thought it was a bit. They asked me to like perform it on the bus. Like, no, it's just my thoughts and feelings. When I started to get into grad school and have my first practicum site, it was actually in Stillwater. It was at a domestic violence center. I was often left in tears. There's a lot of things I didn't understand about violence, and I felt helpless, and I wanted to change people hurting other people. I then became a trainer and an educator, and I did all those like ally training stuff. I did a lot of stuff on men and masculinity. I talked to white folks about racism. I decided that the work was to center majority culture for some reason. I wanted them to understand. I wanted competencies towards oppressed groups, and that didn't work. Years and years I poured into that kind of concept, and it would really hurt to do it that way. It was not sustainable. Not for me. Give space. We've already talked about Dr. Mullen and all the work that they have done. But the truth about our profession is that we cannot decolonize our mental health or therapy process because therapy is built on violence. But we can emotionally decolonize our conditioning, form healthier relationships with one another, with ourselves, with our histories of violence, and learn from our cultures and our elders. I started to do things differently. I wanted to focus on folks who were hurting too. Perhaps folks who looked like me, sounded like me, had similar stories. And at some point I noticed that my roster was nearly exclusively queer, trans, first-gen, BIPOC, religious minorities, children of immigrants. Something was shifting and tingling. This is where my work was at. This was exciting. And I learned so much of what I was taught from traditional theory was not working with this population, nearly rejected. And I will say COVID in 2020, telehealth changed everything. Keep in mind the population I was working with. The pivot to quarantine meant that all the students I was working with moved out of the dorms and back into the closet with their parents. That folks of color who were taken to the streets to protest were now worried about violence. My patients were now in my home. We'd pop up on a screen and a patient would genuinely ask me, "Hey, Dr. Salazar, are you okay?" Or, "Wow, is that your art behind you?" Like, "Oh yeah, man. I got bored in here. I painted a whole mural in my house. I really like it." I was like, "Oh, I like yours too. Is that a Harry Styles poster I see behind you?" They showed me their rooms, the new affirming clothing that they bought. They met my dog. They genuinely worried when I started sniffling or coughing. "Are you okay?" We were all worried about dying. "How's your mom?" Some of the rules that we had created were gone because of the situation we were in. And I kind of liked that part. The genuine care. I wasn't inviting them into my space, my clinical office, and making them talk like me. The relational, creative, collaborative, and community approaches were becoming more effective. We cared about each other. I got more involved in my community and began creating spaces of healing and joy. And it healed me to do it this way. And this was sustainable. Those are some of my friends. These are all but one. One's missing, but this is the board of Pride Denton. I did the assignment, although I didn't get in a pair or a group, sorry. But one of Dr. Bernhein's reflection questions for us yesterday were, who are your people and what have they taught you about care? Something to that effect. I said, my people are those who feel rejected or excluded from systems. My people are those who have been deemed dirty, weird, wrong, evil, those who had to learn to live outside a system or place of origin, chosen family, a collection of folks pushed out of different communities and because of that had to create their own traditions, rituals, and rules, perhaps even the ones that they were told that didn't belong to them. So to me, care is creating together. But what does that look like clinically to get creative or create with your patients? Okay, this is one of my affirmations that I say all the time with an artist friend of mine, a registered art therapist. We consult with each other all the time. And every once in a while, the bit is, words are hard. Words are hard. I always thought that having patients describe their internal experience is a very challenging task. We are limited in talk therapy to talk, to use words to describe really kind of weird things. I'm supposed to tell you this like squishy hearted baby, you know what I mean? Like there's just a weird feeling, sensation. Is it a pain? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it a hope? Is it? I'm asking folks to do a hard thing every time I ask them, how are you doing? Words are hard. And so to me, when I recognize that I am, again, the power of having someone sit across from me or get on a screen across from me and talk so I understand and using words that make sense to me, I can appreciate the power of that process. And words are hard. And not everyone thinks that way or uses words to express. Here are just a few activities I've done with patients and even for myself. When I'm stuck trying to use words to describe how I feel, and I don't want to get stuck there. I don't want words to be the limitation always of my process to feel or to communicate, at least not talking. With patients, I have used songs and playlists to express deeper emotions. I've encouraged folks to create an altar for your younger self, put a little picture up. Look how cute I am with that Alf sweatshirt. Put a favorite toy. Show a lot of compassion and love. Some folks are good with words, but maybe not good at talking about them words. So writing letters to your younger self, an ancestor, an elder, or a story. My favorite part about performing is I get to kind of take a snippet of a story and just say that, this like moment in time. I've unpacked relationships with students. I think this one was a supervisee. There was an undescribable like admiration, yet tension. So we used colors and shapes. I've had patients reclaim food and other traditions, again, ostracized from their own communities of origin, and had to make sure that they were practicing, making sure that their language didn't die, making sure their food traditions didn't die, even though they weren't among their culture. Use the mask activity. You can do this with paper mache masks or a paper with a front and back, and encourage folks to draw, do collages of what they show the world and what's inside. What's great about these activities too is much more collaborative. It just looks different in the room. I have a patient kind of coming over looking at my laptop to show me one of these, or we're drawing together in the room. I should have been an art therapist. I tell people this all the time. Is it too late to get credentialed? I'm holding the piece of paper and I'm asking them to tell me the story. It's very engaging, very tactile, very communal. In what ways do you create? I don't think it means to be an artist that you have to sell your wares or be in a gallery or be trained in that profession. I think if you're connected to that expression and you cultivate it, you are an artist. These are some of the ways that I create, and I would highly recommend that if you create, you document, because it's kind of fun. I paint, I write, I perform, I ride my bike and take photos of the graffiti. I build and maintain fires for ceremonies. I engage in my culture in ways that feel fun to me. I dance with my friends and listen to music. It's kind of a colorful life and I love it. Community, what could this look like clinically? I don't know why I put clinically in quotations. Maybe that's my stuff. You don't have to worry about that. It's I'm clearly going through an identity with my, struggle with my profession. Groups is where it's at. I wish I did more groups currently, but when working with QT BIPOC, queer, trans folks of color, this was the space to do a lot of that work. One of my favorite activities for identity expression was a show and tell. We did that over Zoom a lot. Each person would go and I think if I had them think of it on the spot and gave them 30 seconds to run around their house or their room to go grab an item to represent their identity. A lot of crystals. This one was probably one of my favorites. In a QT BIPOC group, I had one member, older than everyone else, not from the United States, identified as a gay man. And at the end of session, towards the end, he said, wow, just listening to all of you all, the younger people, y'all are so full of pride. I wish I had that. How do you do that? I am so ashamed of who I am. All the things they call me, all those nasty words, I believe them. So I said, we're not leaving here until this is fixed. So we had a whiteboard in the room, and I said, Okay, we've all been called something related to our queer identity. So I had them line up. There's markers, and I want you to write the word you've been called, the word you think, the word you read that still sticks. And they had plenty. Some I won't even repeat. But for purposes of public space, confused, disgusted, evil, wrong, among other slurs. And we stood back and looked at the board, really deflated as a group. And I looked at the group member and said, well, no wonder. No wonder you can't feel pride if those are the words you see. So I said, let's go back to the board. I now want you to cross off and replace that word with something you believe is true about yourself or someone else in this room. Y'all have been coming in this group for weeks. What do you believe about them, if not about you? They wrote courageous, stylish, smart, full of rich history, funny. Now all the words were either crossed off or erased, and we now had all of these very positive things. And the energy in the room was different. And I turned to that group member again. I said, what do you think of the board? That's us. Even if I'm not those things, y'all are those things. But I belong to this group. So that has to be me too. The part of the belonging is what pulled him into pride. Because if he could not see that for himself, he can see that in the group member across from him who he cared about, and I belong here and we are together, then that's me too. I said, take a picture of the board and I'll see y'all next week. And to me, that was such a microcosm of community and why we held such events, why we gather, why we share resources, and how I took someone from shame to pride. How we took someone from shame to pride. I never believed that my work stopped at the clinical hour. After session, where is your client going to find community? Where are you going to find community? Is there a group of people, a third space? Where are you going? To build community, I would say identify which community you belong to or want to cultivate. Identify community with shared values, not just interests. Show up, participate, build trust with consistency. Sign up, volunteer, share your ideas, contribute. Start something, lead something. This is my quote: find the artist, find the gaze. In a deeply sensory-rich experience at APA in Seattle this year, I was left drained from leaving the convention center. I don't know if anybody else went to APA. It was a lot. It was a lot. My brain could not. I had to leave. I paid like $600-700 and I couldn't attend. It was not accessible for my brain. I went back to my hotel. Still plenty of daylight. I'm in a brand new city that looks kind of fun outside my hotel window, but my brain couldn't go back to that convention center. So I thought about my healing practices and what I needed to do to snap out of it and feel grounded back in my brain and body. And I said, find the artist, find the gaze. I got on Instagram and I found the neighborhood that was having an artist walk where you can hop around the neighborhood to different galleries. It was the coolest night ever amongst strangers. But I knew the communities that I belonged to and I needed to find, even in a strange city, even after an awful morning. This is us at City Council. This is us at a performance event. And this is us during Pride. I've asked people to kind of cultivate or create their own spaces, and this is actually a patient of mine who had just come out to me, and he was a rock climber. He worked in a gym that was very gendered and not inviting to all spaces, all people or all bodies. And so I think as part of his effort to feel like, now I'm out, I want to give back, I want to be a part of the community, I want my two worlds to meet, he started this event. I've asked other friends of mine and community leaders, I asked them the question, what community event are you most proud of, and what was the spark? One of my friends says, Big Gay Swim Day. I just wanted to go swimming. It doesn't have to be that deep all the time, you know, but I don't have a pool. But what I know about this person, they wanted all their QT friends to also feel safe with their scars, with their bodies, with their families, and not have to feel worried about harassment. Another friend, monthly brunch at my house, because I like brunch, obviously. But it's also a sober brunch. In his house, his rules. Someone else, monthly outreach socials. All we did was work, and I didn't want to work anymore. Can we just have some fun? We're always organizing, we're always fighting. Can we just like hang out? Spider Dead, this is the performance, black and white photo you saw earlier. Performers go up there and perform about their grief. It's a great ritualized annual event, and the concept is to not be alone in your grief. And mine was Night Out on the Square, because I don't like parades with corporate sponsors, because our community isn't a vodka brand or a bank. It's a lesbian-owned vintage shop downtown. In other words, I didn't see myself represented in the bigger prides. How much time do I have? Oh, okay. This is a long way to say honor the traditions, creativity, and cultural practice of QT BIPOC folks. As I mentioned earlier, my folks are the folks who have not fit in or have been ostracized in systems, and so we know what it's like to not need the main line. That's why we turn to Black trans femmes. This is why we turn to our queer communities and Black femme women, right? I think a lot when we talk about self-care or healing, it's a what do you need? I would guess I want to ask that same question in a different way. What do we need from each other? What can you contribute? And what is sustainable? This is my favorite part. I think I used to feel guilty for getting something out of sessions. Anybody else used to feel that way? Like, oh, that felt really good. Supposed to. I alluded to this patient earlier, the one who would genuinely check in on me during COVID. The Harry Styles poster in the background. I affectionately call her Playlist. And I can't wait to tell you about her. There's gonna be a lot of text on the screen. You don't have to read it all. It's mostly my notes, so I don't forget to tell you all the details. But feel free to read. A bit of an intro. Client was a 20-year-old queer cisgender woman, identified as Palestinian or used the word Arab to describe herself, Muslim, and was at the onset of therapy, peak COVID, quarantine, was living with her family, mom, dad, and younger sibling. We were in lockdown. She is perhaps the funniest patient I've ever had. She was rapid fire in her speech, lots of quips. She fidgeted a lot when she was nervous and feeling vulnerable. She would look down when she experienced shame. She would show frustration when she had to touch down or get deep with her feelings, or when she was being tearful. She would express irritability at the demands of all relationships, of who they wanted her to be, having to consider their feelings, the resentment, the guilt that she felt when she would hurt their feelings, resentment when they would hurt her feelings. Connection was hard. Being squishy was real hard for this one. And there was a lot on display when she would feel it. She had pride in her academics. She was wicked smart. And she loved her style and taste, her fashion, and especially her taste in music. She wore hijab for a portion of our work together, but then for a portion she didn't. And at one point she got a really cool mullet and she was so happy to show me. During our work, she was diagnosed with generalized anxiety and bipolar 2. She got medicated and she hated that. Her goals, the things she brought to session: how can I be gay and Muslim? Seriously, how? I need a handbook. How do I do this? Do I need to come out? And the goal was to discuss family, culture, religion, gender, and sexuality. Again, all the humor, all the sarcasm, and it was noted that we had some shared identities. Discussion about family and her role and expectations with the family and culture. We discussed this secret, separate world she maintains away from her family. When she's out with her friends, she is much more expressive. It has to put it all away or lie to her family to maintain the separateness. Not just in the closet, it was a whole other life. We assessed her relational world. Who does she surround herself with? Who's her community? Who does she feel safe with? Who is she out to? How do those people identify? A lot of community, like, who are your people? Who are your people? We identified relational images. What is a good Muslim? So if she's gay, does that mean that she can't be a good Muslim? It is difficult for her to feel connection or affirmation or pride in any of these identities. I can't be both, so I will be neither. We had some barriers to the goals, of course. Lack of emotional safety at home. My auntie called me a whore once because I had torn jeans. I can never come out to them. I think I won't push it. I'll just marry a guy. It'll be fine. There was great aversion to a vulnerability, humor as deflection, but what a gift, that humor. There was lack of role models or examples of good gay Muslims. And how can you be it if you can't see it? We tried our best to address those barriers. We identified online role models and hoped for a queer future. We helped her explore, imagine, dream beyond expectations, beyond that immediate, like, I am like 20 years old. She would reply, I just want to be Harry Styles. We identified and create safe relationships. She joined my QT BIPOC group. She met another queer Muslim there. And she began, at one point, she had moved out, got her own apartment, and started making her own traditions. She invited her friends who identified as Muslim, and for the holidays, she would host them, make food, laugh, and she could be both. We practiced vulnerability in session, in group, and with her best friend. She was a great communicator, but struggled to share about her feelings without sounding like a morbid being. She really was. She would just say, Twitter, just go to my Twitter. Those are all my feelings. It's all memes. It actually became very important. I let her share, like, what's your Twitter meme right now? She's trying to tell me, go there, that's where I communicate. In an odd way, but that's how I communicate. Client would reference musicians, songs, and she was given the assignment based on how much she would talk about Harry Styles. I want you to make a playlist for me. She got so excited about this activity. She was on it. Finally, more vulnerable expression. The first playlist she shared with me was after her bipolar 2 diagnosis. I received the first playlist via email at night. I do not do that. And I don't recommend you do that. Check your email when you're in bed. But I happened to that night. And her playlist was waiting for me. And this was the first song. Picture myself leading other people's dreams now. But, dark, there's a hole where something was. Dark, there's a hole where something. So I cried in my bed, and I paused it just as I did with you all. I had never heard this song before, but that's all I needed to know. This kid who had been laughing and joking and smiling, like, oh my God, I can't be emotional, just squirmy, squishy in her own way. I could not understand the depths of her psychological and emotional pain until she put together, meaning thoughtfully, a list of songs for me to listen to understand her. And these were the first words she wanted me to know. Doc, there's something wrong. And I missed it. I had been working with her for weeks. It picks up after that. It's a rock song. She shared over 100 songs with me, many of which we talked about at great length, a lot of lyric identification. We would listen to them together. I'd pull up YouTube or Spotify, and we would listen to them together, and I would see her squirm in her seat, and I would just sit with her in that discomfort and listen to the whole song. At one point, she asked, if I never end up coming out to my parents, will you be disappointed? I said, I'm sorry that I even gave you the impression that that's what I would feel. No, I would not be disappointed. I would understand. Before our final session, she was set to graduate, go to grad school in another state. She had a girlfriend. She white, but she cool. She was not out to her family, and we acknowledged that it didn't seem to stop her from getting some of the things she wanted or feeling connection and joy. And in our last session, we exchanged playlists to communicate our perspectives of her journey and our work together. There were songs expressing care and gratitude for the work we did. And a song that she introduced me to that I still use to help heal and dance today is called Free by Florence and the Machine. I think you should totally check it out today. One of the lyrics is, I hear the music, I feel the beat, and when I'm dancing, I am free. When I talk about this patient, I had gotten the feedback about how I talked about her. And I was like, well, how do y'all talk about your patients then? What if we view them as people who impact us too, who care about us too, who shape us, who heal with us? It's over a year later, I'm still talking about her as someone so significant to me. Dr. Mullen reminds us that we are the medicine, not the profession, not the psychologist, but I believe the collective. I was in that room with that patient. We did that work together. And I am healed too. I have no concept of time right now, so I hope this is okay. In short, I told y'all there would be benefits. This is it. What you pour in is what you get out. You get tender and squishy when you are creative, when you are in community, and when you see healing as collective, not individualistic. And when you do that, you reap the benefits of that. And that's how I got squishy. I was able to get a little squishy up here with you all, and I was glad. These are the resources and people. If you want to look up their books or Instagrams, or also just copy paste what Dr. Bird and I put up on the screen yesterday, because it was pretty much nearly all of mine. I think that's what I got for y'all. I'm open to questions if there's time, but that's it. Thank you.